Hey there, Highlanders. Chef Crudo here. I'm going to teach you how to do a little bit of brisket today. But first, we got to start off by washing our hands. With brisket, you want to really make sure that you're going low and slow. Now, I've already got my fire going on outside, and I've got my brisket here prepped out. And while my fire is heating up and getting some nice embers on it, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to trim the brisket and then season it up. So we're going to get started. I've got an 11-pound brisket here, and what I've done is I've went and got my boning knife. It's got a nice flexibility to it. The way I like to cook my brisket is fat side up, but at the same time I don't want to have all this big thick layer of fat on it to where all the seasonings get lost into the fat. So that way, whether you cut it off before service or if you eat it and then you just don't eat that part of it, you don't lose the flavor. So what I want to do is I'm going to trim down the brisket to where it's just about yay thick with just the fat on top. And so that way it still seasons the brisket, but yet we don't lose any seasonings when we go to serve it. All right, so on the brisket, the makeup of the brisket, this is actually missing a piece. I went ahead and bought a brisket that does not have the decal cut, which is this top cut that is normally up here. It still has a lean side, which is over here, and a fatty side. And you'll be able to notice that once we start cutting into it, there's going to be a bit more fat over here. Now, if you notice, where I always start off is right along this fat line. You got a nice bit there that you can start off working with. I'm going to use my boning knife cutting away from me. And we're just going to keep trimming this down. And so now we've got a big slice of fat right here that we don't really need. So now that we've got all the cutting done, I went ahead and moved it over to a carryable pan. And be sure to take that cutting slowly. If you need to, make sure to trim off just a little bit at a time. You don't want to lose any of that flesh. Another thing that I've done, as you can see here, is I went ahead and cut my brisket in half. This is going to do two things. One, it's going to speed up the cooking time. Two, I don't have a full household and I don't necessarily want to cook all of this brisket at once. So I'll be able to reserve some of this and then drop it off for family or do anything else with it later on. Next up, we're going to move into seasoning. So I've got some cumin, I've got garlic powder, black pepper, paprika, and kosher salt. Now I've already got them all mixed here. I'm going to have the measurements listed down in the comments below this video. But all I'm going to do is I've got my dry hand and my wet hand. This hand obviously handles my brisket. My dry hand is just mixing up the seasonings and putting it on to the brisket. Now I'm going to be pretty generous here. You got to remember that you've got to season through the meat. So the bigger the piece of meat that you have, the more you actually want to season. And then spread it all out and then rub it into every spot that you can. So I'm taking my salt, do that light sprinkle, particularly on the bottom a little bit. We don't want to go too heavy though. We're going to go a little heavier on the top because what that fat is going to do as it goes down, it's going to take some of this flavor with it. And it's basically going to baste our brisket as it's cooking the entire time. We've got a nice light sprinkle of salt on the bottom. Now we're going to go to the heavier salt on the top. Now feel free to use all of this, or if you don't want to use all of it and you want to go in a lower salt flavor, then go ahead and use less. I prefer to go ahead and use all of it and particularly on the top, because this is similar to a salt crust. I'm not necessarily going to brush it all off after the cooking, but this is really going to help flavor it a lot. There we go. So it looks real salty at the beginning, but then once we're done cooking and we knock off some of this crust of the salt, it's going to be so good. Okay, so now we're out here, we got the smoker going. I've got a nice fire. It's a little bit hot right now, but that's okay because I'm going to sear off my brisket at the beginning. And then just from here on out, you want to make sure that you maintain a low heat. What we're looking for inside here is going to be about 250 to 275, maybe even 225, depending on how big your roast is. Okay, so we fast forwarded a little bit. Now we've got our brisket mostly done. I've moved it over. As I said before, we've got just a little bit more. You can tell how far we're going either by thermometer, or you can also just feel the resistance in the meat. And I'm feeling this is getting pretty close. It's been several hours. Altogether, we're probably looking at a 6 to 8 hour cook on low and slow. A little bit sooner if you go a higher heat. All right, so here we are about 6 to 7 hours later, and we've got ourselves a nice half of brisket there. We've gone low and slow. Our fire is now out, making sure that everything is nice and safe. And I've got a carving knife. This has rested probably about 20 minutes since I pulled it off, so it should be good to go. First thing we're going to do before I forget, we did put a little bit of a salt crust on there, so we need to brush some of that off. And I find it just works pretty easy just to use a bit of your finger. I can still see some of the flakes on there. So I'm just going to knock off some of those flakes. We didn't go heavy with the salt crust, so we don't have to go crazy. But we do want to make sure that this isn't too salty. All right. I think I've got a good portion of that all off. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll start off from the traditional side of the cut. Now, if you don't want to get too big of slices, there's multiple ways to start cutting this. At first, you're going to just start cutting it like normal. I start off going towards the T. So if you see that right here, the brisket kind of comes out like this. You want to cut against the grain. So I'm going to start off there. Try to do smooth cuts as much as possible. Now I'm going to bring this in for a close-up. You can see that the grains are all cut. If this wasn't a cut across the grain, you'd start seeing this lines going across this way instead of this way. So we're going at trying to do about a 90-degree on those angles. Now, as you start getting down, right now we still got some good size slices, but obviously it's going to start getting pretty long slices. And if that's what you want, then great. If not, and you want to make this go a little bit further, now we're going to start turning it. So I've sliced this way, and I'm going to slice this way, just a little bit. I don't want to go too much, because then again, like I said, we won't be against the grain. So I'm going to take a few slices there. And you're going to keep this corner that we started off with. Again, you can see that it's not against the grain. Sorry, this is just a phone, so not a great camera. And you can just go back and forth switching as you're slicing this. And now we got ourselves some nice brisket. Let's give it a quick taste test. That is good. It's tender, right amount of salt. You get everything. It pulls apart very easily, but it doesn't fall apart. One of my biggest things with barbecue is it should hold itself together until you're ready to eat it. So same thing with ribs, brisket, anything like that. Chicken, you want to smoke it, but when you pick it up, you should be able to hold it together, but it will fall apart so easily the minute you try to cut into it or bite into it. So that's the brisket that I'm sure you've seen that at some other events, like I said before. I hope you enjoy it. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them down in the comments below. Also in the comments below, you'll see the measurements for the brisket and for all the seasonings. Thank you very much, and I hope you guys are all staying safe and having a good time. Catch you later.